Okay, so imagine this for a moment. The world is completely glued to the Middle East. It's early 2025 that Israel-Iran conflict has just exploded, right? It's dominating everything. Headlines, diplomacy, military focus, the world's attention, and frankly, a lot of its military capability, it's just pinned down elsewhere. Now, with that kind of massive distraction, what do you think other big players, maybe someone like China, might be doing sort of behind the scenes? Because that takes us straight to our deep dive today. We're focusing on China and, well, what looks like really intensified, coordinated pressure on Taiwan. And this doesn't feel like just saber rattling, does it? It seems much more complex. We're seeing this multifaceted strategy roll out, especially since things heated up in the Middle East. So our mission here is to unpack what Beijing's been doing across the military front, psychological, even logistical. We want to get a handle on their intent, maybe project some next steps, and look at countermeasures for Taiwan and its allies. Basically, this deep dive is your shortcut to understanding what's really going on with this strategy, cutting through the noise.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how Beijing seems to view this moment. It looks like they see a real window of opportunity. With the U.S. military, the diplomatic side, so heavily focused on Israel and Iran, there's this perception, maybe a reality, of a reduced deterrence threshold over in the Indo-Pacific. From Beijing's viewpoint, this distraction in two theaters could potentially slow down America's ability to reinforce the Taiwan Strait if something flares up.
And they're not being quiet about it either, right? We've seen their state media, even PLA commentaries, kind of jumping on this narrative.
Oh, absolutely. They're talking about fractured American hegemony, hinting at a moment for regional unification. Taiwan isn't always named explicitly, but the implication is, well, pretty clear.
So how overt is that public messaging? Are they directly calling out the U.S. or is it more subtle?
It's fairly explicit, but still crafted with some deniability. Less direct taunting, more shaping this narrative. The story they're pushing is that America's overstretched, can't handle multiple crises, and this, creates space psychologically, both at home in China and internationally, makes U.S. power seem like it's waning, and China's ambitions, well, may be more inevitable.
Okay, so the stage is set, world's distracted, China's crafting this narrative. How are they actually seizing the moment militarily? What are the concrete actions we've seen?
Well, the military side has been, frankly, unprecedented in its coordination recently, especially the naval activity. Back in June 2025, we saw something new. Two Chinese aircraft carriers, the Shandong and the Lining, operating simultaneously out in the Western Pacific.
Two carriers at once. Where were they positioned?
The Shandong was operating east of Taiwan, near the Bashi Channel, but the Lining, it pushed further out into the Philippine Sea, significantly beyond the first island chain.
Okay, beyond the first island chain. Why is that specific location such a big deal? What's the signal there?
That's a major strategic point. The first island chain, runs from Japan down through Taiwan to the Philippines. It's historically seen as this kind of natural boundary limiting China's power projection into the Pacific. So when a carrier group like the Leaning operates beyond it, it's a statement. It signals a jump in their blue water Navy capabilities. Their ambition to operate further out, not just regionally, challenges that sort of traditional control.
And they weren't just sailing around.
No. They were busy, conducting anti-submarine warfare drills, air defense exercises, lots of carrier aircraft operations, really simulating complex joint force kind of scenarios.
And it wasn't just the big carriers at sea. You mentioned earlier, back in April and May, this surge in amphibious readiness, satellite imagery catching mobilizations.
That's right. We saw mass movements of things like the Type 075 LHDs, Type 071 LPDs, and even these Zhuikao-class mobile piers.
Okay, break those down for us, non-naval types. What kind of capability are we talking about with those vessels? Is this about landing troops?
Exactly. Think of the Type 075s as, well, almost like mini aircraft carriers, but for helicopters, designed to land a lot of Marines and their gear. The Type 071s are big transport docks. And those mobile piers, the Zhuikao class, they're fascinating. They allow China to essentially build temporary port facilities quickly, even on, say, a hostile beach.
So together?
Together, they represent a serious capability to launch large-scale amphibious assaults, moving thousands of troops, vehicles, supplies. And significantly, this buildup was concentrated at bases in the Eastern Theater Command, specifically near Xiamen and Zhengzhou.
Which are very close to Taiwan's western coast.
Directly across the strait. Yeah, it's a very pointed kind of buildup.
Definitely sounds like it. And the pressure wasn't only from the sea. The air activity was intense, too. June 19th, 20th, you mentioned over 74 PLA aircraft near Taiwan's ADZ.
Yeah, and critically, 61 of those crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait. That's a major escalation in itself.
And the types of planes involved, it wasn't just fighters, was it?
No, it was a real mix. We saw J-16s, Su-30s, those are advanced fighters, but also H-6 bombers for long-range strike, unmanned drones, and importantly, the KJ-500 AEW&C aircraft.
Right, the KJ-500, that's the Airborne Early Warning and Control plane, the command post in the sky.
Precisely. Its presence tells you this isn't just a random flyby. It indicates a complex, coordinated exercise package. They flew in multiple waves, layered formations.
Designed to do what, exactly?
It looks designed to mimic a wartime tempo, to really stress Taiwan's air defense systems, force them to react, maybe push their response cycle to the limit.
So it's partly about wearing them down, making them scramble jets over and over, testing their readiness, almost like a psychological game through attrition.
That's certainly part of it. Exhausting resources, yes, but also testing their readiness, their response times, gathering intelligence on their procedures.
And alongside this physical pressure, what about other domains? Missile forces, cyber.
We've seen increased readiness from the PLA rocket force units, particularly in Fujian and Zhejiang, right across from Taiwan. Drills simulating attacks with DF-16s, the new PCO-191 multiple launch rocket systems, even the YJ-21 hypersonic missiles. And the targets in these simulations. Island fortifications. Pretty clear what that implies.
And cyber. Any connection there?
There have been unconfirmed reports, but they seem credible, of cyber intrusion attempts targeting Taiwan's energy infrastructure, military logistics networks. And interestingly, these attempts seem to coincide with the timing of the big PLA exercises.
So it really paints a picture of a multi-domain, synchronized effort, probing from all angles.
Exactly. Air, sea, missile, cyber, they're testing everything.
Okay, we've covered the hardware, the military muscle being flexed. But modern conflict, it's not just about that, is it? There's this battle for hearts and minds, too, this invisible front. What's happening there?
Oh, it's quite extensive. China's propaganda machine has been working overtime. They're simulating really severe scenarios, things like blockades of major ports like Kaohsiung, imagining blackouts across Taipei, even simulating the decapitation of Taiwan's political leadership.
That sounds incredibly alarming. Are these narratives actually landing? Are they affecting morale in Taiwan, or is there pushback?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? These simulations, they feed into disinformation campaigns, especially on Taiwanese social media. They push narratives of potential civil unrest, humanitarian crises if conflict were to break out. From what we can tell, the response is mixed. Yes, it causes anxiety, no doubt. But there's also evidence of resilience, maybe even a hardening of resolve among many Taiwanese. They've been preparing for this kind of psychological pressure for years.
And internationally, how's China messaging this?
Internationally, they're trying to normalize their presence and pressure. We've seen the foreign ministry issuing warnings, quite sternly, to navies from other countries like the UK and France, telling them not to transit the Taiwan Strait, trying to assert it as their internal waters, basically.
And trying to frame the U.S. as the problem.
Absolutely. They consistently portray these tensions as, a natural result of American overstretch or global recklessness, shifting blame, painting themselves, almost as reacting to U.S. interference.
So we've laid out all this activity, military, cyber, psychological. How do we piece it together? What's the actual intent here? Is an invasion imminent?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And based on current indicators, the consensus is that a full-scale invasion isn't imminent, not right now. But, and this is the big but, this is far from just random posturing. It's clearly a very calculated, multi-layered strategy.
Multi-layered in what way? What are the different objectives?
Well, you can break it down. First, it's definitely a capability demonstration, showing the U.S., Japan, other regional players what China can do, aiming to deter intervention. Second, it's a pre-conflict rehearsal. They're genuinely practicing complex, multi-domain operations, refining coordination between different branches of the military. Third, there's that psychological escalation we talked about, trying to wear down Taiwan's will to resist, create internal divisions. And finally, it maintains strategic ambiguity, keeping everyone guessing, are they just signaling or are they truly preparing for the real thing? That uncertainty itself is a tool.
Okay, strategic ambiguity. How does that actually work as a tool? What's maybe the chilling part of that ambiguity?
The chilling part is how it enables what we call gray zone tactics or escalation. This is where Beijing might be laying the groundwork. Actions that are aggressive, coercive, but designed to fall just short of triggering an Article 5 type military response. They blur the lines.
Like what kinds of actions fall into that gray zone?
Well, you could imagine things like maritime blockades, but maybe disguised under non-combat reasons, customs inspections, environmental quarantines, fishing disputes, something like that, or potentially the seizure of one of Taiwan's smaller offshore islands like Dongyin or Matsu. They're Taiwanese territory, but very close to the mainland. A limited move, but hugely symbolic. You could even see limited missile strikes presented as warnings designed to shock, but not necessarily start an all-out war.
And these gray zone tactics are incredibly difficult to counter because they don't neatly fit into traditional warfare categories. So, looking ahead, say the next 12 months, what scenarios seem most likely?
Well, continued pressure, more drills, more incursions, ongoing cyber stuff, it seems highly probable. A blockade simulation, maybe testing the waters, that feels like a medium probability. Seizing an outlying island, maybe low to medium probability. A full-scale invasion within the next year is still generally assessed as low probability, though never zero.
And what does this mean for Taiwan? What are the key implications for them?
For Taiwan, it means constant vigilance. Sustaining that round-the-clock air surveillance, definitely bolstering missile defenses, especially on the west and south coasts facing China. Expanding their own asymmetric capabilities like drone warfare becomes even more critical. And maybe just as important, accelerating those civilian resilience programs, blackout drills, ensuring government functions can continue even if decentralized. Maintaining public morale is huge.
And for the U.S. and allies, what are the takeaways there?
It certainly raises the stakes. Things like considering more visible deterrence, perhaps deploying carrier groups more assertively in the Philippine Sea, strengthening those interoperability exercises with partners, Japan, Australia, the Philippines becomes crucial. Practicing working together.
What about direct support to Taiwan?
Absolutely essential. Bolstering Taiwan's cyber defenses, continuing to supply advanced systems like anti-ship and anti-air missiles. The goal is to make any potential Chinese action look incredibly costly and difficult. It's about raising the perceived cost of aggression so high that it outweighs any potential benefit for Beijing.
So, wrapping this up, it feels like what we've discussed today shows China's moves are arguably the most coordinated show of force towards Taiwan we've seen in years. And the timing, leveraging the U.S. distraction in the Middle East, seems very deliberate.
It does.
And while that full-scale war might not be the immediate plan, this tightening noose, the military pressure, the deception, the coercion, especially those gray zone tactics, it's unmistakable, isn't it?
It really is. And it leads to a fascinating point. The next phase of Taiwan's defense, it isn't just about the hardware, the planes and missiles. It seems increasingly critical that it also lies in psychological resilience, the strength of its global partnerships, and ultimately the clarity and credibility of deterrence.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. How do these non-military factors, resilience, alliances, clear signaling, how vital are they becoming in these modern geopolitical contests? And what could that mean, not just for Taiwan, but for future global flashpoints?